Spider-Man Miles Morales was released in November 2020 as a full game by Insomniac, despite the fact that it's more of an expansion as opposed to a full game. But nonetheless, the first thing that I immediately noticed about Miles Morales, outside of the really amazing graphics that this game has, is the fact that this game has way more personality than Spider-Man ever did. Miles Morales introduces Miles as the main character of this game, and although you did play as him in some sections of Spider-Man, he is now a proper Spider-Man. And he goes through Harlem in the winter. It's around Christmas time, and he takes on the duty of becoming the sole Spider-Man, at least temporarily. And Miles always tries as hard as he can to help out everybody, but of course his good deeds are cut short by his Spider-Man stuff. And one of the first things you do in this game is swing, as you did in the last game. And the swinging in this game is incredible. I think the swinging in this game is better than Marvel's Spider-Man. There's just something so special about pulling off those air tricks and even using the Venom jump to gain more height and watching Miles twist and turn dynamically and then swinging right out of it with these dynamic animations. It just looks really fantastic. The swinging in this game is great. The air tricks are just incredible, and as I said, you can use a Venom jump like that to extend the combos of like all the air tricks you can do, or just to gain more height, and you can even double it, stuff like that. It is just amazing. The swinging in this game is incredible, and I understand that a lot of people have really just talked endlessly about how great the swinging is, and I can absolutely vouch for it. The swinging is just incredible. You really have to experience it. And I appreciate how the developers really went out of their way to differentiate Miles and Peter so they don't just play identically. It feels much better to swing around the city as Miles than it ever did as Spider-Man. But of course, because this is a superhero game, villains have to show up and cause some ruckus, and that's exactly what the Rhino does at the very beginning of the game. Getting into some of the combat stuff, the combat, for the most part, was pretty similar to Spider-Man, except the combat has been slightly changed. Since Miles Morales has electricity powers named Venom, he does have the ability to use these Venom powers, and he can use it for crowd control, or he can use it to just lay a really high damage attack on an enemy. We'll talk a little bit more about the combat later, but Rhino shows up and he destroys some Roxxon properties. And Rhino isn't the big bad guy. It's actually a character named the Tinkerer, which is revealed to be Finn, who's one of Miles' best friends. And this game introduces the Roxxon guards and the Underground as the bad guys that you have to fight. And then there's your regular 2-bit thugs that go around the city of New York. But Miles defeats Rhino almost single-handedly here. Of course, the Rhino introduction is a big, giant opening that this game has that really sets the tone immediately, and they try to showcase the fact that Miles does have these Venom powers, these electricity powers, that adds a little bit of depth to his combat. But we have pizza time, as you know, in the Spider-Man fandom. But Miles and Peter have some good interactions here, where Peter reveals he's going to be away for a few weeks on a vacation to Europe, and he makes Miles take an oath that he will protect New York to the best of his abilities, as he will become the only Spider-Man in the entire city for a period of about 3 weeks. And this is the new Peter Parker face. At first, I didn't like it that much, but I've grown accustomed to it. So, Spider-Man gives him a whole bunch of training challenges, combat, traversal, stealth, basically just a repackage of the Taskmaster or Screwball stuff from the first game, but it makes sense because you're training him. Getting into the combat of this game, it is slightly different. The base combat is more or less the same. Square attacks, circle dodges, triangle does your web attacks. You can also do air combos. You can slide underneath enemies. You can launch them into the air. You can do swing kicks, the usual stuff. However, the combat system in this game is slightly different because in Spider-Man, with Peter, you could charge the focus meter to give you finishers, but in this game, every 15 hits gives you a finisher. And the bar underneath the health bar is the Venom meter, and that allows you to use your electricity attacks. So it is a different combat system, and dare I say, I think the Miles Morales combat system is better than 2018, but maybe it's just because it's a different character. I wonder how they're going to do that in Spider-Man 2, if Spider-Man and Miles, or rather Peter and Miles, will have the two different systems. But I thought that the combat was more enjoyable in Miles Morales because it puts a bigger emphasis on getting combos, as opposed to Spider-Man 2018, where you could just kind of build up the focus meter. You didn't necessarily need to use combos. But I really like the approach for Miles, where you basically have to prioritize building big combos, and the Venom attack can assist you with that. You can also use it, as I said, for crowd control. So there's a new depth to the combat in this game, and I thought not only the swinging, but the combat was more enjoyable in this game. But in terms of general content that you receive in this game, it does feel just kind of like Spider-Man 1.5, I suppose. And we do have some stealth gameplay. The stealth is more or less the same as Spider-Man 2018. However, there's one big difference. Miles has the ability to camouflage himself, which means he can basically turn invisible. And when he turns invisible, this allows him to take out an enemy and then very quickly sneak away, or he can take out an enemy that's in the danger zone and then he can turn invisible and then swing away and hide for a while. This camouflage does make stealth a lot easier to do with Miles and even more effective to do with him, because, as I said, he can turn invisible, and that's pretty useful in some stealth encounters. He can also use it in general combat just to give himself a bit of an edge on the enemies, but overall, I thought the combat was way better in this game. Maybe not way better, but it's definitely an improvement. A little under halfway through, Spider-Man finally gets his new suit, the classic suit, which is just the I don't want to say standard, but it's the Miles Morales suit. It's the black and red. And this game just looks incredible from a graphical standpoint. It just looks great. The environments, the character models, the animations. This is a great looking game. And we can see Genki here, who's Miles' best friend. Rio, Miles' mother, who's running for city council. The story in this game, I thought it wasn't that interesting to me. There's like this big combat between the Roxxon and the underground gang, which is run by the Tinkerer, which, as I said earlier, is revealed to be Finn, who's Miles' best friend. The story of this game wasn't as interesting to me as the 2018 Spider-Man story was. And then we're introduced here to the Tinkerer, and you do fight the Tinkerer later. But you do get a very massive bridge section in this game. Kind of like the Amazing Spider-Man, where Spider-Man is on this collapsing bridge and he has to rescue as many people as he can, all the cars and stuff. And even Miles reveals his raw strength pulling the two sections of the bridge together. Very Amazing Spider-Man-esque. But it's a very cool scene because it shows Miles' strength and his resiliency just on his own. He doesn't necessarily need Peter to do any cool Spider-Man stuff. And I always thought that this section was just great because he has this big stand-up with the Roxxon guards, and then he turns invisible, and then all of a sudden they can't find him. He doesn't necessarily turn invisible, he just camouflages himself, which I guess in turn would be the same thing. But this gives Miles a huge advantage on Peter Parker for some instances. In terms of side content, you do have the underground hideouts, which is basically the same thing as the Kingpin construction sites, and you do have the Roxxon sites as well, which, as I said, is just kind of more of the content that the original game had. But new to this game is the Friendly Neighborhood app, which basically just replaces the crime system. Crimes still dynamically show up, but you can track them easier, and you can also get side missions from it. Following the completion of side missions and just any of the side activities, you do get completion bonuses such as base tokens, which can be used to upgrade gear and unlock new suits, etc. And then there's collectibles in this game. There are 3 different collectibles. There's time capsules, postcards, and audio samples. The time capsules basically act as the backpacks in this game, where collecting them will reveal a little bit of history between Miles and Finn, similar to the backpacks. The audio samples are you and your Uncle Aaron go around the city collecting various samples, like basically the sounds of the city, and then you craft not so good of a beat afterwards. And the postcards are like a big treasure hunt between you and your mother Riho, where you just go around collecting different postcards in various locations. That one was the most interesting, but that's like a post-game collectible. Once again, just like Spider-Man 2018, the collectibles in this game were actually interesting, and you didn't feel any sense of this is just too monotonous or too annoying or whatever. You necessarily didn't have to go out of your way. Speaking of, there's also the underground caches. These caches will actually net you with technology points that you can use to upgrade your gear and even unlock your gear. So those are very useful to get. And there isn't an overwhelming amount. And speaking of suits and gear and technology and stuff, you have a vast array of suits that you can unlock in this game, and you can unlock suit mods, visor mods, etc. And you can even unlock new gadgets. You can upgrade said gadgets, and there's a skill tree. So there is a progression system that more or less functions the same way that it did in Spider-Man 2018. And you can even replay missions in this one. Wow. Overall, Spider-Man Miles Morales acts more as an expansion to 2018 Spider-Man as opposed to a full-on new game, but nevertheless, the swinging is improved, the combat's improved. The story wasn't as interesting to me, but I think overall, this is a great game. I don't really want to treat this as if it's a full game. I guess technically it is, but still, it's absolutely worth playing, and it's a great sequel to Miles Morales. And next up is Spider-Man 2, and I'm very, very excited for that, and I'm most importantly excited to see where Peter and Miles go from here. I'm very excited to see it, but overall, I'll give Miles Morales an 8 out of 10.